My parents tried to take my $500,000 inheritance for my sister, but Grandpa's secret clause made them lose everything they planned to take. My name is Camila. I am 30 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. All my life I have known one thing. In my parents' eyes, I was never the chosen one. That title always belonged to my younger sister, Savannah. Savannah is 3 years younger than me, and ever since she was in preschool, the world around me began shifting toward her. I still remember my 7th birthday. My mom brought home a tiny cake from the grocery store, lit exactly 7 candles, and told me to make a wish. No balloons, no music, just my parents and an old camera. I forced a smile. But when Savannah turned 4, Mom hired a full-blown party company, invited over 20 neighborhood kids, set up a backyard play area with a bounce house, cotton candy machine, and even a woman dressed as Princess Elsa singing birthday songs. When I asked, "Why don't I get birthdays like that?" my mom just chuckled and said, "Because you're older now, you don't need those things anymore." But I was still a kid. I also dreamed of wearing a princess dress, having a party filled with lights, and hearing someone place their hand on my shoulder and say, "You're special." As we grew older, things became clearer. Everything I had, I earned myself. "Savannah?" She just had to ask. I saved nearly a year's worth of allowance to buy the rollerblades I dreamed of. But the moment Savannah saw them and started crying, my parents drove to the sporting goods store and bought her a pair that cost twice as much. When I protested, Mom said, "You're the older sister. You should give in." I learned to swallow my anger like bitter candy, but the bitterness never really went away. In middle school, I made the school volleyball team and was elected team captain. For the final game of the season, I hoped someone from my family would come cheer me on. But when I looked up at the stands, there was no one. Afterward, Mom called and said Savannah had a stomachache. I had to stay home with her. I had nothing left to say. Savannah once scribbled a drawing of her dream house in art class. My parents framed it and hung it in the living room like it was a masterpiece. Me? I won 2nd place in a statewide writing competition in 10th grade and got nothing but a nod and a good "but don't let it go to your head." That disappointment chipped away at me. Still, I kept trying, studying hard, winning scholarships, joining extracurriculars. I always hoped that if I worked hard enough, my parents would finally see me, that they would be proud. But every time their gaze returned to my sister, as if I were just a blurry shadow behind her. One day, I asked my dad directly, "Are you ever proud of me?" He looked at me like I had asked for something extravagant. "You don't need praise to know you're good, right?" I nodded. But inside, it felt like the air had been sucked out of me. As I got older, I stopped trying to compete. I just wanted to be acknowledged as a person, not someone whose role was to make Savannah shine. I entered high school with one goal, to be so good no one could ignore me. I joined the debate team, the school newspaper, and the STEM research group for gifted students. While my friends were still figuring things out, I had a detailed plan for each school year. Grades, achievements, projects, even my college applications. I stayed up late doing homework and spent weekends volunteering at the city library. Every time I aced an AP exam or got accepted into prestigious summer programs, I would rush home hoping for a simple "well done" from my parents. But every time I was met with silence or a "that's good, but don't get complacent." And Savannah, she got a C+ on a math test and came home bragging. Mom took her out to celebrate. Dad said, "That's amazing. Math was always a nightmare for me. You're already better than I ever was." I stood in the kitchen holding a glass of water, but it felt like I was holding a stone. It was not Savannah's fault. Honestly, I do not think she even realized she was wrapped in a cocoon woven by our parents. But the truth was, she was always praised, always rewarded, even when she did a fraction of what I did. I remember the parent-teacher meeting in 11th grade. The principal herself invited me to a statewide student leadership forum. Only 10 students were selected across Oregon. I wrote the application myself, submitted the essay, and passed 3 rounds of interviews. When I brought the invitation letter home, Dad glanced at it and said, "Don't forget your chores if you're going to be gone. Your mom can't clean everything alone." As for Savannah, when she said she wanted to learn how to drive, My parents immediately gave her a used Subaru and hired a private driving instructor. I learned to drive using Aunt Lucy's car on weekends, practicing alone in an empty grocery store parking lot after work. I was not jealous of Savannah. I was jealous of what it felt like to be believed in, to be anticipated, to be someone's pride, a feeling I only knew from books and movies. I received a full scholarship to Clarkford University, an elite school with an acceptance rate below 10%. I came home holding the acceptance letter, heart pounding with joy. But when I handed it to my mom, she said, "Clarkford, that's far. Are you sure you can handle the pressure?" Then she turned and walked into Savannah's room without another word. I stood there as if someone had just cut the last thread tying me to my family, not because she doubted me, but because she did not even want to believe I could achieve something worthwhile. That spring break, Savannah wanted to go to New York with her friends. My parents did not hesitate to pay and even bought her a new camera to capture her youth. Me? I asked for money for a plane ticket to attend an international scholarship interview in San Francisco. Mom shook her head and said, "You should learn to save. You already got a scholarship and still want more?" So, I went alone using money I earned from my cafe job and selling things on eBay. I sat on the plane looking out the window, tears falling. Not from loneliness, but because I finally understood no matter how hard I tried, in my parents' hearts, that place would always belong to Savannah. I entered college like someone stepping out of the dark, still squinting at the light. While my classmates had parents helping them move in, I quietly carried 2 suitcases onto the first bus to the Clarkford campus. No one saw me off. No good luck hug. No one watching from behind. I was used to that. But this time, the emptiness was not so easy to swallow. The more I tried to stand tall, the more I realized a growing hole inside me. Something achievements and busyness could not fill. I developed chronic insomnia, often staying up until morning. Sometimes I would sit staring at a blank essay for hours without typing a single word. I did not tell anyone because I believed if I showed weakness, no one would be there to help me up. Everything truly collapsed when I fainted in my sophomore finance class. The doctor said it was a nervous breakdown caused by prolonged stress. That is when the school required me to meet with a counselor. During the first session, I sat silently for 15 minutes. Then the counselor gently asked, "Camila, do you feel like you're straining just to be seen?" I broke down in tears. I could not hold it back anymore. Those therapy sessions pulled me out of the fog. I began to understand that emotional neglect from family was not my fault, that what I experienced was real harm, not me being too sensitive like Mom always said. After 2 years, I learned to rebuild my self-worth from those shattered pieces. I chose finance as my major, not because anyone guided me, but because I wanted to build the kind of stability I never had. I worked at the Student Support Center, then landed an internship at a small investment firm. I started earning my own income, just enough to cover the tuition not covered by my scholarship, and rent a tiny room off campus. No more hearing Savannah scream through the house about missing shoes or Mom calling me downstairs to scrub the kitchen while I studied. I graduated with honors, received offers from 3 major firms. I chose a financial consulting company in Seattle, where I knew I could truly grow. 7 years have passed and I am still there. From analyst, I was promoted to team leader, then to associate director. I work tirelessly, but for the first time, I feel seen. No one sees me as someone else's shadow anymore. At 27, I bought my first apartment. It was a small space filled with light near Green Lake. I stood in front of the door for 10 minutes, just holding the key, breathing in the feeling of finally belonging to something that no one had to give me. I did not call my parents. I knew if I did, they would only ask, "How many square feet is it?" And then start talking about how Savannah just launched another TikTok channel that was pretty fun. But that was fine. I no longer lived for their praise. I kept my distance. I only went home once a year for Thanksgiving and usually left early. Conversations with my mom rarely went beyond, "How have you been?" And "Savannah just got a new haircut. It's gorgeous." Dad barely spoke at all. I thought I was used to it, thought time would eventually blur everything away like dust. Until I got the call that my grandfather had passed. I still remember that morning. My Aunt Linda, Mom's younger sister, called. Her voice was trembling. "Camila, your grandpa's gone. Last night in his sleep." I gripped the phone. My heart went still. He was old and his health had been failing for years. But I still was not ready for that moment. He was the only one in the family who ever made me feel like I mattered, not because I was accomplished, but just because I was me. When I told him I had won a college scholarship, he said, "You make me prouder than anything. No one can ever take that from you." That sentence had carried me through some of my darkest days. The funeral was quiet, somber, and awkward. I arrived early, stood silently in front of his photo, and placed my hand gently over my grandmother's trembling fingers. Savannah stood next to our parents, looking polished, her eyes red, but I could not tell if it was from grief or because Mom had just told her about the inheritance. A week later, the whole family was invited to the lawyer's office for the will reading. I did not think much of it. I went out of obligation. That changed when Mr. James, my grandfather's longtime estate attorney, flipped through the papers and read aloud. All of my personal assets, including real estate, investment accounts, and savings, shall be equally divided among my 3 grandchildren, Camila Harper, Savannah Harper, and Levi Anderson. It froze. The lawyer continued, "As of now, the total value to be divided is approximately $1.5 million. Each recipient will receive $500,000. The room fell silent. It felt like I had just been swept into a storm, not because of the money, but because I knew at that very moment my parents would not let this go. And I was right. That evening, just after I got home, I received a text from my mom. "Are you free? Dad and I would like to stop by and talk." 15 minutes later, they arrived. I made tea, poured the water, feeling the heavy dread settle in. Dad spoke first. "Camila, your mom and I think it would be fairer if you gave your share to Savannah. She's going through a rough time. She's only working part-time at the bakery and she just broke up with her boyfriend. We know you'll understand." I was stunned. I looked at my mom. She did not meet my eyes, just fiddled with her purse strap. "You're doing fine. You have a good job, your own place, a car. She has nothing." I clenched my jaw. My words came out like stones dropped into water. "But that's Grandpa's money. He chose to divide it equally. I didn't ask for it." Mom looked up, her expression now heavy with disappointment. "You're being selfish, Camila. If he knew Savannah's situation, I'm sure he would have wanted you to share." I stood up, my voice trembled. If Grandpa wanted Savannah to have everything, he would have said so. This was his decision. Not mine, not yours. Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Do you not remember who raised you, who fed you, paid for your school supplies, took you to the orthodontist, and now you want to take everything and leave your sister behind?" I was speechless. Everything I had ever taken pride in. My independence was suddenly twisted into a debt I never agreed to. Did you forget who worked since age 16? Who paid tuition after the scholarship ran out? Who took out credit to buy her first laptop while Savannah got a brand new MacBook as a gift? Silence. Dad took a deep breath, then said coldly, "If you keep that money, don't expect to ever set foot in this house again." I let out a soft, joyless laugh. Then I said, quiet but clear, "Maybe it's time I stopped trying to." They left shortly after, leaving my nearly paid-off apartment filled with the scent of cold tea and the echo of accusations. I sat alone. Something in me broke, but something else was set free. I knew the battle was not over, and I knew my parents would not stop because to them, I had never been the rightful heir. Just 3 days after that confrontation, I received an email from James's law office. The subject line was chilling. "Temporary change of will, executive notification." My heart pounded as I opened it. The letter confirmed that my father, Daniel Harper, had just been appointed as the official executor of my grandfather's will, and that he had filed a petition to review the distribution on grounds of diminished mental capacity. I was stunned. So, this was their next move: twist the intentions of the dead to serve a child they deemed more deserving. I immediately called my grandmother. Her voice was calm, but this time I could hear a sharpness I had not before. "I know, Camila, and I'm not sitting this one out. I went to her house that afternoon. The red brick home in Spokane was as quiet as ever, but today the silence felt heavy with truths long kept hidden. She sat me down at the kitchen table where I used to eat apple pie every fall. "Camila," she said, placing a thick folder in front of me. "Did you know years ago your father tried to convince your grandfather to leave everything to Savannah?" My eyes widened. "What? You were still in college then?" He emailed your grandfather 3 pages long, arguing that you were independent and Savannah was sensitive and vulnerable, that an equal split wouldn't be fair. I clenched my fists. She nodded as if she expected that reaction, but your grandfather refused. He said clearly, "I have 3 grandchildren and I won't let any of them feel less valuable than the others." She pulled out a copy of the will. "This," she said, "this is the final version. Your grandfather personally added this clause. Any individual who challenges the distribution or attempts to alter it will forfeit their share." I read those lines over and over, relieved and burning with anger. My father had known, yet he still tried to manipulate it. Worse, he used his position to twist everything in Savannah's favor while treating me like I was in the way. Grandma handed me a USB. "This has the audio recording from the will amendment meeting, his original notes and signatures. If needed, give it to the lawyer." I held her hand tightly. "I won't let them undo his wishes." She placed her hand on my shoulder. "I've always known if anyone in this family would stand up for what's right, it's you." The following week felt like a battlefield. My father emailed extended family claiming he had evidence that Grandpa was confused when drafting the will. My mom hinted indirectly on the family Facebook group that I was ungrateful, clinging to every penny and breaking the family apart. I said nothing, but I was no longer afraid. I forwarded all the documents Grandma had given me to Mr. James, along with a formal request to review my father's role based on the will's dispute clause. The result came faster than I expected. The following week, Mr. James called an emergency meeting with all parties involved. In the cold, brightly lit conference room, he announced, "After thorough review of the evidence, including original audio and witness statements, we find no basis for claims of diminished capacity. Furthermore, under Clause 7, Daniel Harper is hereby removed from his role as executor." My father's face turned pale. My mother stared at him in disbelief. And me? I did not say a word. I just looked toward my grandmother at the end of the table and she nodded. I knew then, even if I was not the daughter they chose to cherish, I was the one Grandpa trusted to protect what was right. After that defining meeting, my grandmother, Eleanor, was no longer the quiet woman in the background. She became one leading the charge, the shield I did not know I needed until she stood up for justice, for truth, and for me. She did not just bring the recording in the will. She reached out to my grandfather's 2 sons, Uncle Thomas and Uncle Mark, who had kept their distance from my father for years due to past disagreements about money and values. When they learned he had tried to reinterpret the will to cut me out, they were livid. "Daniel doesn't have that right," Uncle Thomas said during a private meeting with Eleanor and Mr. James. "He signed that will. How can he now pretend it means nothing?" Eleanor replied, firm but calm, "Because he never saw anyone but Savannah as worthy. Not because she needed more, but because in his mind, Camila never belonged." I sat beside her listening, every word cut deep, but I did not cry. Not anymore. I had learned to face the truth without letting it swallow me. Mr. James concluded that with the support of the remaining heirs and overwhelming evidence of attempted manipulation, the will's execution would be handed over to a neutral third-party attorney outside the family. By the following week, everything was finalized. My father was completely removed from all authority. No one could change the distribution. No one could rewrite Grandpa's wishes. A few days later, I got a call from the bank. The first transfer, $500,000, had been confirmed. I sat frozen on my kitchen chair. The early summer sunlight streamed through the window, lighting up the edge of my scratched oak table. I touched the phone screen, the numbers glowing clearly. It was not that I did not believe it. It was that I had never thought I could keep something that belonged to me without having to earn it through obedience. That very afternoon, I drove to Grandma Eleanor's house. When she opened the door, I hugged her tightly without saying a word. She did not ask anything. She just held me close as if to say, "Your grandpa saw everything, Camila, and he's proud." That night, she made the spaghetti Grandpa used to love. She turned on his old cassette player, letting the soft jazz he adored fill the room. And for the first time in years, I ate without holding myself together because I was allowed to let go. After dinner, she took me upstairs. Grandpa's office remained untouched. On the bookshelf, she pulled out a wooden box filled with papers, letters, and a small leather notebook. "Your grandpa kept track of everything you accomplished," she said. "You didn't see it, but he followed your every step. Here's the first article you wrote for the school paper. Here's your Clarkford scholarship letter. And this is your graduation photo." I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling slightly. She looked at me, eyes full of sadness and pride. "Camila, your grandpa didn't split things equally out of obligation. He did it because he believed you deserved a fresh start without carrying the weight of injustice. When I left that red brick house, I knew I had not just reclaimed an inheritance. I had reclaimed my voice, and that meant more than any check ever could." But the story did not end there. Because the very next night, Savannah called me. Her voice was shaking like it was about to break. "Camila, I don't know who to trust anymore. Mom and Dad want me to do something I don't want to do." I stayed silent, heart racing. I knew those words were a doorway, one that led to a truth I had not yet heard, and I had to brace for the next storm. That call from Savannah was the first stone dropped into a still lake. Ripples followed fast. Less than 2 days later, I got a text from my mother. "What did you say to Savannah to turn her against us? Are you happy now?" I did not reply, but from that moment on, the lines were clear. I had become the enemy, not because I chose to be, but because they had pushed me there. A week later, I was removed from the family Facebook group. No warning, no one spoke to me, no one asked if I was okay. They simply erased me as if I had never existed. Then came the rumors. A former classmate of Savannah's messaged me, "Hey, did you really force your grandpa to rewrite his will? People are saying you pressured him by making constant demands." I was stunned, not by the accusation, but by knowing exactly where it came from. My mother, the one who once said, "Family is everything," had now become the source of the cruelest stories about me, spreading like wildfire through tea circles, church groups, and whispered texts behind my back. And it did not stop there. My father sent an email to my lawyer stating that the family no longer considers Camila a moral representative and that all assets should be reevaluated to protect the Harper family's core values. My lawyer replied with a single line, "We'll let the law decide who's defending what's right." Whatever was left of our family fell apart completely. I was not invited to Grandma's birthday. A cousin unfollowed me on Instagram, and the uncle I was closest to texted, "Camila, your aunt is heartbroken. Are you sure this is what your grandpa would have wanted?" I did not answer because there is nothing left to explain when the truth has been twisted so badly no one wants to see it. I started avoiding gatherings. I skipped Easter, spent the 4th of July in my apartment, watching fireworks through the window. Those quiet nights became the space where I stitched myself back together. Little by little, I no longer waited for a phone call. No longer hoped for a text from Mom asking if I was okay. But then Savannah called again, this time after 10 p.m. Outside, everything was dark. "Camila, Mom told everyone you manipulated Grandpa, that you threatened to leave the family if you didn't get more. I know it's not true, but I'm scared if I speak up, she'll never forgive me." Her voice trembled, and I realized Savannah was a victim too, just from the other side of control. "Have you ever thought," I said softly, "that a family that only loves you when you stay quiet might not be love at all?" Savannah was quiet. After a long pause, she said, "I'm trying, but they make me feel like I'm doing something wrong just because I started thinking differently." I did not blame her. Not anymore. I understood now. Some people have to go very far and hurt very deeply before they can see the place they have escaped from. But my parents showed no signs of stopping. I heard that Dad was threatening to sell the ancestral home in Spokane, saying Camila betrayed the roots of this family and does not deserve to hold on to any memories. I said nothing, but Grandma did. She called me after a private family meeting I had not been invited to. Her voice was calm but firm. "Camila, you're not alone. Don't let them make you bow your head just for having self-respect." And in that moment, I realized true family is not who shares your last name. It is who is willing to stand in the crowd and say, "I believe her." But it still was not over because a few weeks later I got a letter. Not from my parents, but from the tax office. They were investigating suspicious assets filed under Savannah's name. One of the transfers traced back to an old account that had belonged to my dad right during the week my grandfather died. I set the letter down. My chest felt cold. This was not just emotional anymore. This was something bigger and darker unfolding behind the curtain called family. Not I. I did not think Savannah would ever show up at my door again, especially after everything. But on a Saturday afternoon at the end of the month, as I was cleaning the kitchen and the radio played one of Grandpa's old jazz favorites, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. She was standing there, no makeup, no fancy clothes, just Savannah, plain, tired, and red-eyed. I stepped aside to let her in without a word. We sat on the sofa, the silence broken only by the sound of wind slipping through the curtains. After a long pause, Savannah finally spoke. "I'm sorry." I turned to her. She clutched the hem of her coat, eyes fixed ahead. "Not just for what Mom said, but for not doing anything. I knew they treated you unfairly, I just didn't dare speak up." I nodded. I understood, because if I had been Savannah, the one put on a pedestal, loved to the point of suffocation, I might have felt like speaking up was a betrayal too. "Mom and Dad asked me to sign papers to temporarily transfer my inheritance into Mom's account," she continued. "They said it was for tax purposes. I refused, and Mom told me I was no longer her daughter." I took a deep breath, not from surprise, but from hurting for her. "Camila, I don't want to become a copy of them. I want to understand why I was so spoiled while you were always expected to give everything up." I was speechless. "I used part of Grandpa's money to enroll at the community college," she said. "I'm studying social work. I want to help people hurt by their families like you." And like me, I could not hide my surprise, not because Savannah was not capable, but because she had dared to step out of the role our parents wrote for her. We talked until late that night about Grandpa, about all the times I tried to be seen, about how Savannah never felt strong enough to stand on her own because everything was always handed to her. "I was jealous of you," she whispered, "because you could make your own choices. I only knew how to follow what I was told." That confession did not make me feel victorious. It made me feel light, because for the first time, we truly saw each other without our parents' filter. Since then, we have kept in touch regularly. Every Wednesday, Savannah calls me after class, and I send her reading material on psychology, autonomy, and boundaries in relationships. A month later, she invited me to her first presentation in soft skills class. Her hands shook holding the mic, but when she saw me in the front row, she smiled. At the end of her talk, she said something that silenced the whole room. "I used to think family was a constant, a safe place. But sometimes you have to go far away from it to learn who you really are." I did not clap loudly. I simply stood up, walked over, and hugged her. No more words were needed. Now we have made it a weekend ritual to walk around Green Lake together, where I used to jog alone after long workdays. Now it is where we both begin to heal. I am not sure if my parents will ever understand the change that has happened. At one point, Mom called Savannah in tears, saying, "Camila's gotten into your head, and this family is falling apart over some money." But this time, Savannah did not fold. "I'm choosing the truth, Mom," she told her. "I'm choosing to do what's right, not to stay silent like before." When she told me that, I looked at her for a long time. In that moment, Savannah was not the pampered girl who did not know fear anymore. She had become someone who could face pain, who could try to make things right, even if that meant stepping away from the arms that once protected her all her life. And for me, that marked the beginning of a new chapter, not one of conflict, but of healing. I had always thought I would use the inheritance to invest or create a personal fund, a way to feel more secure in an unpredictable world. But the deeper I went into my healing journey, the more I realized that the first thing I needed to invest in was not an asset. It was myself. The first thing I did was pay off the remaining balance on my student loans. When I signed the final payment confirmation, I did not feel loud joy. What I felt was a deep sense of relief, like I had just taken off an invisible backpack I had carried for over a decade. I spent part of the money to upgrade my apartment, not to show off, but to make it a real place of healing. I swapped out the old sofa for a soft olive green chaise, installed larger windows that opened to the balcony, and planted lavender and mint in small pots. Every morning, I pull back the curtains, take a deep breath, and make tea with the same teapot Grandpa once used. And for the first time, peace does not feel like a distant concept. I also helped Savannah pay for her first semester's tuition. She tried to decline, but I told her, "This isn't Mom and Dad taking care of you. This is me choosing to support someone who stood up for herself." She nodded, eyes watery, and from that moment, the awkward distance between us disappeared. The closer I grew to Savannah, the more I realized how many people out there were just like us, carrying wounds caused by favoritism, control, silence, or denial from those who were supposed to love them most. I began reading about family trauma. I joined online support groups where people shared what it was like growing up in broken homes that were still labeled as fine. One evening, after attending a workshop on the power of conditional forgiveness, I sat on the steps outside the downtown counseling center and for the first time admitted to myself, I wanted to do something bigger for people like me. I wanted to become someone who walks alongside others, not because I have healed completely, but because I understand that pain too well to watch others endure it alone. I enrolled in a pre-counseling program for working adults. Every Tuesday and Friday night, I would attend class and sit beside people also trying to start over. Some were retired teachers, some recovering addicts, others former military. We were all different but strangely connected, maybe because each of us carried an untold story. I chose to focus on therapy for adults who grew up in toxic family environments. I learned how to listen without judgment, how to guide someone in drawing the line between boundaries and exploited kindness. I started volunteering at a center for teens who had experienced emotional abuse. Twice a week, I helped them write emotion journals, express fears through art, and even practice saying no without feeling guilty. One day, a girl named Elise whispered, "You're not like the adults at home. You don't look at me like I'm a problem." I just smiled and said gently, "That's because you're not a problem. You're someone learning how to live as your true self." That sentence, simple as it was exactly what I needed to hear when I was 14, standing alone in the school courtyard, holding an award letter with no one there to receive it with me. I know this journey is far from over. I am still learning. I still have doubts. There are days when the past creeps in like a quiet storm, but I do not feel lost anymore, because now I am not just Camilla, the girl once labeled too logical, too independent, too cold. I am the one who stepped beyond the unfair boundaries of my family and turned my scars into milestones of growth. And when I see Savannah head down, scribbling notes for her upcoming presentation, I know we are no longer two fragments forced together by blood. We are two people who chose each other with understanding, compassion, and a kind of sisterhood rebuilt from the rubble. It has been almost a year since I received my grandfather's inheritance, but the most valuable thing I inherited was not the $500,000. It was freedom. I have learned how to say no without explanation. I no longer feel guilty for skipping family gatherings I know will drain me. I do not force a smile through their sarcasm or edit my feelings just to keep the peace. I have stopped trying to prove my worth to my parents. If they cannot see me now, it is no longer my burden to bear. One of the biggest things I did for myself was set clear boundaries. No phone calls after 8 p.m., no replying to messages from mom if they are filled with blame or criticism, no letting the past dictate my present. I still keep a few things from childhood. Grandpa's handwritten letters, the old diary I once hid in my desk, the photo of Savannah and me under the apple tree in the backyard. But now I see them as slices of memory, not open wounds. Savannah and I are continuing on our own journeys, sometimes together, sometimes apart, but always respecting each other's choices. She is still studying, and she was just accepted into a transfer program at the state university. When I asked if she was sure about her major, Savannah smiled and said, "No one ever taught me to live for myself like you did. Now I want to teach others the same." We had a small spring picnic at Lincoln Park, just the two of us, some simple food, and a speaker playing Grandpa's favorite jazz tunes. As the sunset lit up her face, I realized some things we think are broken forever can be put back together, if we are brave enough. I started building my own project, a support group for adults who grew up in families shaped by control, favoritism, or emotional neglect. I called it New Arms. Not just a place for healing, but a place to redefine what family can mean. The project has been slow, but steady. We hold small weekend sessions, invite guest therapists, and create safe spaces for people who have never had the chance to be heard. A woman in her 40s once cried, sharing how her mother always compared her to her sister. A college student admitted he had never pursued his dream major because his dad said it was useless. I listened to every story, and each one reminded me of my own. I also began offering one-on-one sessions once a week with a limited number of clients. I was not chasing numbers. I just wanted to do it right. And enough. Grandma remains my quiet companion. She came to the opening of New Arms and gave me Grandpa's old scarf from his final years. To remind you, she said, that no matter how far you go, kindness and fairness should always start from family, or from those we choose to call family. I hugged her for a long time. She did not need to say much. Her presence was the kind of support I once wished for from my mother. And now I have it, just in a different way. My parents still keep their distance. I do not blame them anymore. Maybe the only thing I hope from them now is acceptance. And if they cannot give that, I will still be okay, because I no longer live in the shadows, waiting for someone to flip the switch. I have built my own light. Now I wake up every morning without that heaviness in my chest. I drink coffee, watch the sunlight spill across the curtains, open emails from strangers waiting to be heard. And I know that my journey, even though it began in pain, has led me somewhere entirely different. Somewhere I do not need anyone's permission to be happy. I do not know exactly what the future holds, but I know one thing for sure. The old cycle ends with me. And this new chapter, I am the one writing it. Camila's story is a reminder that sometimes family is not where we are loved unconditionally. It is where we have to learn how to heal and define our worth ourselves. By stepping out of favoritism, setting boundaries, and building her life on her own terms, Camila broke a toxic cycle passed down through generations. What matters most is not the family we are born into, but the way we choose to live with honesty and kindness for those who deserve it.